My name is Sophia Mitchell. I was born and raised in a small town called Fairbrook, where everyone knew each other's name, and the maple tree in front of the library was always the most vibrant in the fall. My childhood was filled with golden afternoons in my mom's flower garden and quiet evenings lying on the sofa listening to my dad read the news to her. My mother, Elizabeth, was the head nurse in the emergency department at Fairbrook Central Hospital. Even though her shifts often lasted late into the night, she still made time to teach me how to braid my doll's hair or bake almond cookies. My father, Tumas, was an investigative journalist for a local paper. He was strict but warm, and he could explain a complex political story in a way that made my 8-year-old self sit wide-eyed in awe. We weren't wealthy, but we lacked nothing: trust, laughter, and peace. Everything shattered on a chilly October night, just 3 weeks after my 12th birthday. That Saturday, my parents had been invited to a colleague's anniversary party. I stayed home with Aunt Clara, my mom's younger sister, and we were rewatching The Iron Giant. When the phone rang halfway through, I barely noticed, but the look on Aunt Clara's face when she picked it up made me stop chewing my popcorn. She went pale. Her hands shook. "We're on our way. Try to stay calm," a voice from the phone said, loudly enough that I could hear it. Clara stood up abruptly and held me tight, like she was afraid I might disappear. I'll never forget what it felt like walking into that hospital that night. The air was suffocating. Harsh fluorescent lights reflected off white walls, and the smell of antiseptic clung to every breath. A young doctor came out, his face rigid, as though he was used to breaking people's worlds. "Mrs. Mitchell didn't make it. She died on impact in a head-on collision. Mr. Mitchell has severe spinal injuries. We're not sure if he'll walk again." Those words felt like a blade slicing into my chest. When I was finally allowed to see my dad in recovery, I barely recognized him. His face was swollen and bruised, white bandages wrapped around his head and neck. He looked at me, tears in his eyes, and whispered in a hoarse voice, "I'm sorry, Sophia. I'm so sorry." I didn't understand why he was apologizing. He hadn't done anything wrong. The other driver had been drunk, lost control, and stole my entire world in a matter of seconds. But as I grew older, I realized my dad was sorry because he believed he had failed to protect my mom. Sorry because he thought he had become a burden to me, his only remaining child. The following months were a miniature version of hell. I woke up early every morning to make my own breakfast. At night, I read books instead of hearing my dad tell stories. He was too exhausted after endless physical therapy sessions. Aunt Clara moved in with us for a while, but the house never felt warm again. I'd heard people say time heals everything, but no one ever mentioned that some wounds don't disappear. They just grow quieter, deeper. And in that darkness, my father began doing something no one expected. After the accident, we were like two shattered pieces of porcelain, trying to hold each other together with what we had left: a few good memories, silent evenings, and quiet resilience. My dad, once the guy running from press briefings to crime scenes, had to relearn how to hold a spoon, how to shift from his bed to his wheelchair. I saw him fight through pain so intense I had to sit outside the therapy room, clutching the armrest, unable to cry. But my father wasn't weak, and he wouldn't let me become someone who pitied herself. 6 months after leaving the hospital, he began sitting by the window every day with his old laptop on a wooden table. At first, it was just scattered thoughts, a few short essays. But slowly, his voice returned, strong, vivid, and alive. His articles were picked up by social columns, spreading quickly for their raw emotion and bold truth. One May afternoon, I came home from tutoring to find him on the phone, a rare spark in his eyes. When he hung up, he said, "Chronicle wants me as a full-time editor." I froze, then ran to hug him. I didn't know if I was crying in his eyes, but I knew my heart was bursting with pride. The man who thought his life had ended had just begun a new chapter, by his own hand. From then on, our small apartment became a mini newsroom. One side was his desk, notes, drafts, cold coffee, and stacks of books. The other was mine: notebooks, the periodic table, and mint-scented markers. We didn't need much: just a quiet space to learn, and a warm space to love. Every Friday night, we watched black and white films, Casablanca, Citizen Kane, To Kill a Mockingbird. Afterward, we'd debate characters, morality, who was right or wrong. One night, I asked him jokingly, "Do you think I'm just like Mom?" He smiled and shook his head. "No, you're what's best of her that stayed." That line silenced every hidden doubt I'd ever had. Though life slowly stabilized, my dad never let me forget I had a future beyond our home. When I entered senior year, he began collecting college brochures. One night, he handed me a folder. "University of Minnesota, their finance program's solid. I think you should try." I looked up, startled. "Minnesota? That far? What about you?" He didn't answer right away. Then he said, "Sophia, I've learned how to stand. Now it's your turn to learn how to fly." That line echoed in my head all night. We weren't rich, but with a small stipend and a partial scholarship, I had a shot. When the acceptance letter came, I sat still for an hour, holding it with trembling hands. "I'm scared," I admitted that evening. He smiled. I was too. But fear only disappears when you walk straight into it. So, on a crisp autumn morning, I boarded a bus to Minneapolis, my small suitcase beside me, and my dad waving from the curb until the bus disappeared behind the trees. I didn't look back. Not because I didn't miss him, but because if I did, I would have cried. And my dad never wanted me to begin a journey in tears. After that unforgettable winter break, my relationship with Nathan entered a new chapter. Calm, profound, and filled with quiet questions. Is this what real love feels like? We returned to campus, weathering snow-covered sidewalks together, staying up late to study, sharing hasty dinners at a little Japanese noodle shop near the dorms. Nathan always carried an old camera. He loved capturing the small things, my teacup on the table, my shadow in morning sun, my expression while reading. Once, I asked him why he never photographed landscapes like others. "Yeah, because the most beautiful things are the ones living right in front of me." Somehow, that answer made my heart tremble. I was stunned. My father remained silent, trying to keep a calm expression. "This is my father's home," I replied, doing my best to keep my voice steady. Gradually, I opened up more. I told Nathan about my mom, the gentle woman who always wrapped birthday presents in sunflower-patterned paper. I told him about the sleepless nights after moving in alone with my dad and the first time I saw him cry. Quietly, with pride. Nathan never interrupted. He simply listened, silently, patiently, never once making me feel like my past was a burden. A year later, I graduated with a finance degree. Nathan completed his design portfolio and received a job offer from a creative firm in Portland. We moved to Eugene, where my dad still lived, still worked as a senior editor for the Chronicle Journal, and still sent me articles marked up with his familiar red pen. I got hired at a small accounting firm. Not flashy, but steady and warm, like the town itself. Nathan rented an apartment near downtown, while I continued having dinner with my dad every evening. We kept that routine for nearly a year, until one Saturday afternoon, while I was peeling pears for my dad, Nathan walked in holding a small velvet box. He didn't kneel. There were no candles, no soft music, no sunset scene like in the movies. Just one question. "Sophia, will you marry me?" I was silent, my heart pounding so loud it echoed in the quiet. I looked over at my dad, who gave me a soft smile, like he had known all along. I nodded. But then I said something that made Nathan freeze for a few seconds. "But I can't leave my dad." He didn't ask why. Didn't laugh. Didn't frown. He simply stepped forward and took my hand. "I know, and I would never want you to choose between the two people you love most." 3 months later, we moved into my dad's old house, renovated with 3 bedrooms, an accessible ramp, and a new bookshelf built just for my father. I don't know how others defined happiness, but for me, it was waking up to the sound of coffee dripping, Nathan softly humming while cooking, and my dad grumbling, "You two talk too fast. An old man can't keep up." On our wedding day, my father insisted on wheeling himself down the aisle to give me away. in front of friends, co-workers, and those who had followed our father-daughter journey for years. She's strong, but fragile. Take care of her like we both always have, he told Nathan, his voice firm but warm. It wasn't a big wedding, it wasn't fancy, but in everyone's eyes there was something far more precious, a love built on loss, patience, and respect. Standing next to Nathan, our fingers intertwined, I thought. Finally, I don't have to choose between love and family. I've found someone who accepts both and calls it home. Life after marriage with Nathan wasn't always sunshine, but we built a home of our own. Where his laughter filled our mornings, my father no longer felt alone. And I, for the first time, believed I was truly worthy of love. We lived in my dad's old house, renovated after the wedding. 3 people, 3 generations, but one family. Nathan set up a small studio in the back room to work remotely. I worked as an accountant for a local firm downtown. On weekends, we cooked together, played board games, or simply sat on the porch, watching the leaves fall. Some nights, I'd wonder how I got so lucky. And then, they showed up. Victoria Reyes, Nathan's mother, was the kind of woman whose gaze could draw a clear line between polite and unpleasant. She had been a philosophy lecturer in San Jose, now living alone after divorcing Nathan's father. Though nearly 60, she still carried herself with sharp elegance, a neat figure, and an eye that judged everything with quiet precision. The first time she visited our home was for Thanksgiving. I had cleaned thoroughly, set the table with care, and even baked a pumpkin pie using the exact recipe Nathan said she loved. But the moment she walked in, she frowned. "This house feels a bit outdated." I smiled politely. Yes, it was my dad's old home, but we've made quite a few updates. "Oh," she replied shortly, her gaze lingering too long on my dad's wheelchair. He was reading the newspaper on the porch. That afternoon, over dinner, she asked bluntly, "Sophia, have you ever thought about moving out to live alone with Nathan? I mean, not everyone enjoys living with the elderly." The turkey in my mouth felt dry as dust. Nathan froze. "And I don't think families should ever be treated like a burden," I said. Victoria gave a tight smile. "You're too sensitive. I'm just saying what many people think." From that day, her visits became more frequent and more uncomfortable. She began bringing Nathan's sister Camilla, a woman in her 30s who worked in HR at an insurance company and always looked at me with veiled disdain. Camilla often asked questions that weren't really questions. "Sophia, you're still at that little accounting firm?" "Oh, I think Nathan could go much further if he weren't so tied down." I knew those words weren't innocent, and I knew they didn't want to help. They wanted me out of Nathan's life. Nathan tried to keep the peace at first, but after he overheard his mother whisper to my father, "Do you realize you're holding my son back from his happiness?" he couldn't stay silent anymore. That evening, he pulled me into the garden where my dad was trimming the lavender. Nathan took a deep breath, eyes red. "I didn't know she felt that way. I'm sorry. You don't deserve any of that." I placed my hand on his shoulder and shook my head. "You don't need to apologize for something you'd never say. I just need you to stand with me." And Nathan did. The next day, he told his mother plainly, "I live here not because I have to. I live here because this is my real family. If you can't respect that, please stop coming." The silence after that was as heavy as a winter storm. Victoria didn't respond. She simply stood, walked to her car with Camilla, and drove away. But for the first time, her gaze wasn't sharp. It was hurt, hidden beneath layers of pride. I didn't feel triumphant. I just felt sad, knowing that sometimes loving someone also means accepting the quiet losses no one talks about. "Sorry, what did you just say, Mom?" I repeated, though deep down I already understood too well. Victoria didn't blink. She brushed her neatly cut hair back behind her ear, her gaze drifting toward the living room, where my father sat by the window, flipping through an old book. "What I mean," she said, her tone as casual as if discussing closet space, "is that at his age and condition, a nursing home might be a better option. Quiet environment, professional care. And this room, Sophia, you and Nathan deserve to have it. Camilla chimed in right after, smiling like she was giving feedback on a design project. If you'd like, I can recommend a place. Very modern, clean, feels just like a hotel. I mean, letting him sit here all day must get a bit sad. I could hear my heartbeat thudding in my ears. Not because I was shocked, but because I was furious. Thanks, but we're fine, I replied, forcing my voice to stay calm. And it always will be. Nathan stepped forward, and his eyes had lost their usual softness. Mom, I think it's time to stop, he said clearly. His father-in-law is not some object to be moved, and this isn't your house to rearrange. Victoria stared at him, stunned for a moment. You've really changed, Nathan. No, I've grown up, he answered. The air between the four of us was so tense I could feel the invisible lines cracking beneath our feet. I turned and walked into the kitchen. I needed a moment to keep myself from crying during a gathering I had hoped would be a beautiful memory. And in that moment, the unthinkable happened. Through the kitchen window, I saw Victoria step out onto the porch and walk directly toward my father. He was sitting alone, tea in hand, his eyes dreamy in the golden light of late afternoon. He didn't see her approaching. And then she pushed his wheelchair. No permission, no courtesy, not a word. I bolted outside. What are you doing? My voice rang out like an alarm. She didn't turn around. Her hands were still gripping the chair handles. If he won't make the right decision on his own, then we help him see what's best. Elderly people don't always know what's good for them. I stood frozen. Camila appeared seconds later, her face tense, but she didn't stop it. Nathan ran out from inside, his eyes going wide at the sight. Mom, let go of the chair. His voice wasn't loud, but it was cold enough to make anyone shiver. Right. Now. Victoria released her grip. Slowly. My father said nothing, he just looked at Nathan, the son-in-law he had once cautiously welcomed, and gave a small nod. Nathan turned to me. Can we ask them to leave now? Without waiting for an answer, he faced his mother and sister. Thanks for coming, but the party is over, and if you can't respect my father-in-law, don't bother pretending to be polite to anyone else. Victoria fell completely silent. She grabbed Camila's arm and walked out of the backyard without another word. No apology, no remorse. Only the door clicking shut behind them, firm and final. That evening, I stood beside my father in the yard, looking at the tomato plants he hadn't finished planting. He took a sip of tea and said softly, "You chose the right man." I gripped his hand tightly, eyes burning, but my voice was steady. And I chose the right side. Life after the housewarming incident became strangely peaceful. Victoria and Camilla stopped visiting, and when they did reach out, it was only through cold, formal messages. Nathan returned to his design work, I continued at the accounting firm, and my father spent his days tending the garden and writing in the sunlit room we had nearly lost. We lived that way for nearly 2 years, until one early September morning, the kind I wish I could erase from memory. I was working when I got a call from an unknown number. On the other end was a deep, serious male voice. Ms. Mitchell? This is Lieutenant Rayner with the Oregon State Police. I'm very sorry to inform you. My hand gripped the edge of the desk, breath vanishing from my lungs. Your husband, Nathan Reyes, was in a highway accident on Route 12. A semi-truck struck him head-on while he was returning from a business trip to Portland. We did everything we could, but he didn't survive. I dropped the phone. No scream, no tears. Just silence, like my body had disconnected from the world. At the hospital to identify his body, my father stood beside me, gripping my hand. I thought I was strong. After all, I had survived losing my mother at 12. But this wasn't the same. Losing my mom was a wound. Losing Nathan was like half my chest had been hollowed out. The funeral took place 3 days later under a bleak gray sky. Friends, co-workers, neighbors, everyone came. Everyone except Victoria and Camila. I wasn't surprised, but I still felt the sting. That night, after my father and I returned home, the front door was already open. Every light in the house was on. My father froze. "You're sure you locked the door?" "Yes," I whispered, heart pounding. I pulled out my phone to call the police when laughter echoed from the kitchen. I stepped in and froze in shock. Victoria and Camila were standing in the middle of the house. On the kitchen table, documents were scattered. Our wedding photos lay tossed on the floor. Several cardboard boxes, clearly theirs, had already been opened, as if they were preparing to pack up the entire home. "What are you doing?" I demanded, my voice trembling with fury. Victoria turned around, her face devoid of shame. "Oh, Sophia! You're finally back. We're just helping out. Now that Nathan's gone, his assets return to his blood family, don't they?" I was stunned. "His blood family?" Camilla stepped forward and placed a folder in front of me. "Here's the property title. Here's the purchase contract. Nathan's name is on everything. And since there's no will, my mother is the only legal next of kin." I let out a laugh, but it was the kind that catches in your throat between tears. "You didn't come to your son's funeral, didn't bring a single flower, didn't walk a single step to say goodbye, but now you show up here asking to split his assets?" Victoria shrugged. "Unfortunately, my son left everything a little unclear, so the law will decide." I didn't reply. I walked over to the bookshelf and pulled out an old cream-colored envelope, the one the lawyer had given me earlier. Nathan's handwritten will, notarized and witnessed. I placed it on the table and slid it toward her. "Amy left everything to me. And to my father, the man he called his second dad. If you want to challenge it, go ahead. But know this, I'm not alone. And I won't back down anymore." Victoria opened the envelope. Her eyes trembled as she saw the bright red notary seal. She stayed silent. Camila quickly tugged on her arm and whispered, "Mom, let's go." They retreated. This time not with arrogance, but with the heavy silence of people who knew they had lost. Not just legally, but morally. I stood in the living room, still scented faintly with morning tea, and felt as if a cold wind had blown straight through my chest. But my father came over, resting a hand on my shoulder. "You don't have to be strong for anyone else. Just live true to the one who loved you, and protect what he left behind." I nodded, tears flowing. "I promise. To you, and to Nathan." After Victoria and Camila left, I sat back down on the couch. Nathan's envelope with the will still lay on the wooden table. My hands were trembling, not from fear, but from the emotion that hadn't fully broken free yet. My father stood behind me, quietly pouring a glass of water. "Do you want to report this to the police?" he asked, his voice strangely calm. I nodded. "They broke in. I can't let this continue." An hour later, a local police officer arrived. I explained everything, from Victoria and Camila's unlawful entry to their attempt to take property that wasn't theirs. Although there was no physical damage or theft, the situation was serious enough to file a report, and I requested a restraining order to keep them away during the investigation. 3 days later, I received a call from James Holbrook's law office, Nathan's legal representative from before our marriage. A secretary's voice came through the line. "Miss Mitchell, we've reviewed all documents. Nathan updated his valid will 4 months before the accident. Mr. Holbrook would like to meet with you in person." I scheduled an appointment for the next morning. And I arrived. Mr. Holbrook, a man in his 60s with silver-streaked hair and a gray suit, stood to greet me and invited me to sit. On his desk was a neat black briefcase and a yellow envelope with my name written in a familiar hand. "First, allow me to express my condolences once again," he said, his eyes sincere. "Nathan prepared everything far more thoroughly than you might have expected, and he wanted to make sure no one could hurt you or Mr. Thomas after he was gone." I clasped my hands tightly in my lap. He opened the case and pulled out a notarized copy of the will. "I, Nathan Julian Reyes, being of sound mind and body, hereby declare that all my personal assets, real estate and bank savings, shall be fully transferred to my wife, Sophia Rose Mitchell." I also ask that Sophia use what I've left behind to care for my second father, Mr. Thomas Mitchell, who gave me a home and a role model I never had as a child. I was silent, my throat tightening as I read the final lines. In addition, Mr. Holbrook continued gently, Nathan left a personal letter for you. I took the yellow envelope and opened it. Inside was a folded sheet of paper in Nathan's familiar, slanted handwriting. Sophia, if you're reading this, it means the worst has happened. Sorry. I never wanted to leave you alone. Especially not when we still had so many things left unfinished. But I prepared for this. Not because I was pessimistic, but because I believe that loving responsibly doesn't stop when we're gone. You and your dad are my true family. I want you to live on without carrying the weight of fighting people who don't deserve you. Use what I've left to protect you both. Live the rest of your life, not just for me, but for yourself. You are the strongest person I've ever known. I love you, and I will always be with you. Nathan. I clutched the letter to my chest, tears soaking into the paper. I didn't need anyone else to validate me. I didn't need anyone to defend me. Nathan had done it before I even knew I'd need it. A few weeks later, the insurance payout from Nathan's employer was officially released. With that money, I paid off the mortgage, set aside a portion for my father to restore the garden, and placed the rest into a savings account I named Legacy Fund, for something greater than just me, or him, or the dreams we left unfinished. Sitting on the porch one autumn afternoon, I watched my dad replant the lavender bushes by the fence, and for the first time in months, I felt a strange lightness in my chest. The pain was still there, but the fear had gone. I was no longer alone, and no one could take that away from me. Again. The days following Nathan's funeral and will reading passed in a blur. I moved through tasks like a machine, answering calls, sorting bank documents, reviewing contracts, but my mind kept drifting through memories. One night, I sat in Nathan's home office, the space where he used to design late into the night, under soft golden light and gentle instrumental music. I flipped through his notebooks, not looking for anything in particular, just craving some closeness to him again. And then I found a dark brown leather notebook, older than the others. Inside were Nathan's scribbled words. Sophia has a checkup next month. I keep hoping for something, though I haven't told her yet. If we're lucky, maybe we'll have a new little someone soon. I'm not ready to be a dad, but if it's with her, even fear feels okay. I bit my lip, tears falling onto the page. I didn't sleep that night. The next morning, I felt nauseous right after brushing my teeth. At first I thought it was just stress, but the symptoms kept repeating. Each morning, along with sudden dizziness, a small voice in my mind, soft but steady, began to whisper. There's still a part of Nathan that remains. I didn't want to hope, but I couldn't ignore it either. A few days later, I quietly went to the pharmacy and bought a pregnancy test. Back home, I locked myself in the bathroom, my hands trembling as I opened the package. The 3 minutes waiting for the result felt longer than the past month combined. 2 lines. Clear, undeniable. I sat down on the tiled floor, hugging my knees, frozen. Part of me was terrified, but another part, somewhere deep in my chest, felt like my heart had just started beating again for the first time since losing Nathan. My father knocked on the door after realizing I'd been in there too long. Sophia, are you okay? I opened the door, holding the test in my hand. He looked at me, paused for a moment, then stepped forward and embraced me. Gently, as if I were 12 years old again, having just lost my mother. Nathan left you a gift, he whispered. A gift for both of us. I broke down in tears. But unlike every other time, this time it wasn't from pain. It was a flood of emotion, grief, hope, and a boundless love. In the days that followed, I went in for a checkup. The results confirmed I was 8 weeks pregnant. Hearing my baby's heartbeat on the ultrasound felt like brushing against a miracle. I began changing my habits, eating healthier, resting on time, and reading parenting books, something I never thought I'd care about anytime soon. My father tended the garden daily, but constantly reminded me not to bend over too long. He even quietly placed a recliner next to my bed so I could rest whenever I needed. One morning, I woke to the sound of murmuring outside. Peeking out the window, I saw him drawing white chalk lines on the ground. "What are you doing, Dad?" I called out. He looked up and smiled. "I'm sketching a wooden frame so you and the baby can plant vegetables together someday. The little one will need a place to play near their mom." I didn't reply. I just sat down, resting my hands on my belly, where a new life was growing, quietly but fiercely. I didn't know what the future would hold. I didn't know if I'd be good enough to be a mom. But I knew one thing. This child was the most beautiful part left behind from a love that had once been whole. And I, though still carrying scars, would become the mother Nathan always believed I could be. By the 6th month of pregnancy, my belly was unmistakable. Backaches came more often, but my spirit felt oddly steady. Maybe it was because I knew each passing day brought me closer to the miracle Nathan had left behind. My father had finished the little garden frame and was now building a wooden swing so the baby will have a place to sit once they start walking. Every morning, I sat in the recliner he placed on the porch, sipping herbal tea, my hand resting on my belly, feeling the baby's tiny, gentle kicks. Peace had returned. Until a gloomy October afternoon, when the doorbell rang, long and urgent, like whoever stood outside couldn't wait. I opened the door, and my heart skipped a beat. Victoria and Camilla, my mother-in-law and sister-in-law, women who once walked into my home like they owned it, who insulted my father, who tried to claim everything Nathan had left behind, now stood before me, without makeup, without expensive clothes. Just two tired, worn-out figures. "Sophia," Victoria spoke first, her voice no longer sharp. "We don't want to intrude, but we need help." I said nothing, arms crossed. Camilla stepped in, her eyes uneasy. "We know we behaved terribly, but things have been hard. Mom's investment firm went under, I lost my job contract. We don't have a place to stay." I looked at them, my feelings a mix of emptiness and complexity. I had imagined this moment hundreds of times, the day they'd come back, humbled. But I never thought it would come this soon. Victoria glanced at my belly, now obvious beneath my oversized sweater. "Looks like you're starting a new family, huh?" she said, half mocking, half curious. I stayed silent. "That was quick," she continued, her tone turning harsher. "Nathan's only been gone a few months and you're already pregnant? Or were you cheating before he died?" My father stepped out just in time. He heard it all, and as always, he didn't get angry. But his eyes sharpened in a way that said everything. I turned to Victoria, my voice icy calm. "You have no right to insult me, and no right to insult this child, Nathan's child." Camilla's eyes widened. Victoria went pale. She opened her mouth to speak, but I held up a hand. "But that doesn't matter. I don't need to prove anything to either of you. Because neither of you ever asked. Never cared. Never showed up when Nathan was alive." I took a deep breath, my words clear and firm. "I don't hold a grudge, but I don't forget. And I won't let the people who once disrespected my father, humiliated me, and denied Nathan's very existence be part of this child's life." "Move back into my dad's old house?" I raised an eyebrow. "Sorry, it's currently rented to a young family. And I don't want any further contact." Not out of spite, but out of self-respect. Victoria fell silent, perhaps for the first time in her life. Camilla looked down, clutching her purse tightly. I gently closed the gate. "I wish you both peace, but please, leave my life, for good." The gate shut behind them. But in my heart, that door had closed long ago. I walked back to the porch, where my father sat with his tea, pride in his eyes. "You don't need to scream to reclaim your dignity," he said. "You just have to live rightly. And they'll realize what they lost." I smiled, placing a hand over my belly, where my baby stirred gently. I'm not living for revenge. I'm living to teach my child what pride truly means. And in that moment, I knew the tragedy had truly come to an end. Not through victory, but through. Sophia's story is proof that no matter how cruel life becomes, resilience and true love will always lead the way. From a woman who lost her husband, carried a child alone, and faced judgment from in-laws, Sophia rose to protect her father, her child, and herself. She didn't need revenge, only to live by her values. That's the deepest message. True strength isn't in loud retaliation, but in upholding dignity amid life's storms. What do you think of Sophia's journey and the choices she made? Share your thoughts in the comments below. And don't forget to follow the channel for more touching, inspiring stories about family and life.